That's a good one.
That's a great one.
It could be an easy segue.
Yeah, we could talk about that one next.
Because I was thinking, with all the things that you were just describing, there's a momentum piece to it. There's a momentum of lifestyle, and
the easier it gets.
Even just, like you were saying, like you can go on autopilot, not really having a moment of clarity and presence about things you're doing and how you're feeling in the moment. And that brings me to like neuroplasticity, which is, I would love for you to explain what that means and how you can leverage that to make change.
Yeah.
But also recognizing that there's inertia of pathways that have been highly myelinated because they're so traversed. They're so often utilized for better, for worse. They might be maybe habits that are unhealthy. They could be good ones. I would love if you could just segue, both of you, to talk about the neuroplasticity piece.
I guess first off, neuroplasticity isn't always good.
Right.
Change in the nervous system and the adaptability to the environment around it is, I guess, the basis of neuroplasticity. And just because I-25 or Highway 6 is shut down doesn't mean we can't get to Denver. And there's these multiple detour aspects in your nervous system that maybe just because one highway or one pathway isn't able to handle this load or this task, there's likely other avenues for that brain to get from point A to point B. Ingraining trenches, right? The more reps you do, a lot of things in neuroplasticity is repetitions, right? And those make the pathways, and the practice makes progress, and your progress you can build and shape to your techniques and your finite capabilities. But repetition's definitely part of that, and really some of the soul aspects of neuroplasticity. We have 3 F's of neuroplasticity in the clinic, and it's focus, fun, and frustration. You have to be focused on the task at hand. So many times we have people that are like, oh, I'm short-term memory, or I can't remember anything, or somebody says, are you focused on that? Like when somebody's telling you their address or their phone number, are you truly focused on hearing that?
They're somewhere else, maybe.
You think about something else. Focus has to be the number one. You have to be intentful with making this change. Or if focus in first thing neuroplasticity in a maladaptive way comes CRPS to me, in chronic regional or complex regional pain syndrome, this chronic pain paradigm, your focus is on that pain. And that's why it rewires and creates a maladaptive neuroplastic change. It's because you're focused on that, and your repetition is day in, day out, minute after minute. So that's how we ingrain that pathway, right? Your focus and repetitions, I think it's like 2,000 times, and you have to repeat something for it to become a pathway in the brain. But if you do it in a fun, playful manner, it's 20 or 40 times. So that's where our second F of fun comes into play, because if we can make things fun, which I like to think we do in the clinic.
I think we do pretty well.
It's a pretty fun environment in an aspect. Patients are mingling together, and we're yelling at this patient from across the room, and it's, hey, I'm seeing you doing that. So
yeah, there's a lot of love in that environment.
A lot of fun and love and community.
And also some of the activities are bizarre. Some of the therapies.
Yeah, definitely gamified.
So you have to just lean into that.
They're like,
listen, I'm going to throw this thing at you. Yellow color.
Just catch that color.
Enjoy it.
And that fun aspect, it helps you focus more. Right? Because if you're having fun, you're focused on that thing. And I think that's a big part for your daily tasks. Sweating or whatever it is, make it in a fun environment. Don't be boring and I have to go do this. No, go have a fun time.
Yeah.
Go have fun. Do things that bring you joy.
Just in its simplest terms, I think that's why sports have such an appeal. They're so fun because it's been gamified. And I know a lot of people, including myself, I don't necessarily love going on a run. I know some people love that and that's their thing. But if I'm going to play basketball, I can run for hours, and I'll love it, every minute of it. It makes me wonder, because I don't know the neurochemical details of that, is that a deep dopamine situation where it's like having fun, like in the flow, oh, success, did the thing, dopamine hit. I'm curious, I would love to know more about that interaction on a nitty-gritty, deeper level.
The focus comes in from this adrenaline, norepinephrine, and serotonin pathway complex of the joy aspect of things, and this sustained focus helps open up what's called BDNF pathways, brain-derived neurotropic factors. It helps to activate, what's the receptor? It's on the very end of synapses, and BDNF helps to activate those areas, and that's like the basis of neuroplasticity and synaptogenesis receptors. They're on the end of these neurons, and they help to connect to other synapses and create these extra connected webs and circuits.
As far as I know, that's a receptor that ketamine acts on. They, for a long time, were trying to figure out why is it actually helping people. And I believe some people were able to figure out that specifically the NMDA is what's being affected because it's known to improve your neuroplastic window for a short period of time.
And that's where
it opens up and primes these ends for new connections. Is that kind of the gist of it?
And those of you that ski know that there probably is still mogul fields underneath. So the aspect that, like, if you choose this wisely, you can create new paths. If you don't utilize that as a medicine and as a therapeutic shift in your paradigm, you're going to recreate the same moguls that powder. You're going to get right back into those same ruts. So using it as a beneficial way.
There's that focus piece again.
The focus piece, right? And fun brings extra serotonin into the mix. And dopamine, contrary to popular belief, is actually not a reward chemical. It's a motivator. So it motivates you to go get that thing. It's not so much a reward once I get that thing. It's like a whole, wow, I need more of that.
As we get older in life, we realize you have these goals and you reach the goal and make it feel good for a second, but losing is way more of a motivator than winning.
And that's where frustration comes in.
Bingo.
There's a way greater ratio of dopamine dumping when you're frustrated at something, to a degree. Like just like flooding your system with dopamine and getting
that motivator.
Yeah, exactly. That motivator to try it again. Like, man, I know I can hit that, or I know I can land that jump, or I can do that thing, that frustration. And that's why learning sports, musical instruments, and these new things, in a run, if I'm just running down the road, right, what motivates you or frustrates you might be a time-based thing. But if you're playing basketball, your opportunity to replay that frustration is the next play.
Yeah, you threw a bad pass and it got deflected and stolen, so next you're locked in, extra locked in on
30
defense.
seconds and you got that opportunity again. So there's that frustration piece. And again, to a level, I know a lot of people that are like, they get frustrated with something and they're like, I'm not good at this, I'm never doing it again. And their thresholds are just a little different.
And there are some things where that's totally fine. But when it comes to helping reintegrate like neural pathways and help heal your brain, the frustration, and I imagine that's part of the coaching piece as you're working with people and setting expectations. This likely will frustrate you at times.
It should.
That's actually part of the process. So feel frustrated, don't avoid it, but also just know if you need to just take a moment, breathe. We're going to come back to it.
And don't be mean to yourself either. It's perfectly fine to feel frustrated with the situation and like, why can't I just wake up and go to the gym?
I've experienced that in the clinical setting when we had a professional snowboarder years ago who had some serious concussions, and somebody who just got things instantly, probably was just a natural on the snowboard at age 3 or 4 and was all his life was just succeeding and hitting these things first, second, third try, whatever. So then to be doing eye exercises or interactive metronome, which is basically you're listening to a rhythm and you have to clap on beat. It's a lot harder than it sounds, especially when you have some neurological injury. He could not figure out the metronome. I saw a level of frustration that was a lifetime of perfection and success led him to, it ended up being a really useful piece of his protocol, like his therapy. But I just imagine y'all work with some pretty high-performing athletes, MMA fighters, that kind of thing, who are expecting themselves to succeed and do things perfectly. I believe firmly that the challenges that we experience in life are perfectly placed there to allow our deepest evolution to come through and our gifts to come to fruition. So it's a humbling experience for these people, I imagine. And having people like you with them, sort of let them set those expectations. Hey, you had a brain injury. This is going to be hard. I'm here with you, though.
Don't expect to be perfect.
I think that goes a long way. That's the biggest piece we have to say. If it's easy, then your brain's not learning anything new. Yeah. If you're going into it and it's not actually challenging you, then why are you doing it?
What's that age-old thing? If it's anything worth doing is worth sucking at to start or something like that.
That piece about challenge is interesting, too. I'd love to hear you guys speak more on that, too. Maybe it's slightly different, but also related to the frustration piece. But when it comes to challenge, I'm looking at like neurological injury, for example, maybe a post-concussion syndrome patient that you guys have. Some specific thing that he or she's doing may be really hard. That's typically an indicator that you're hitting the right pathways, or there's some damage, there's some underfunctioning there.
Yep.
I'm just curious if you could talk about the challenge piece in the therapy.
Do you want to touch this? Or?
I think that's more so with the active stuff that you're doing.
The challenge aspect, again, if it's hard for you to do, it's probably because we should be doing that to a degree, right? If this is the pathway that we suggested us go down, and we're coming up to a lot of roadblocks and a lot of symptom increases and elevating, you don't feel good after, then that might not be it. But we definitely have
maybe
to
you jumped the gun a little bit, skipped a few steps.
We can find an alternative detour.
Gentler way in.
Maybe not straight up the mountain, but like we side switch and we do our switchbacks up the mountain. There's always a level of fluidity with patients and meeting them where they're at for that day. Even not even just for this patient, but where they are for the day too, and providing a little bit of challenge to help that growth. If you're better that day, then I move it a little further. If you're not, then I back it up a little bit. If it's too far away, you're like, oh, fuck that, I'm never doing that. There's no point of me even trying. If it's too close, it's what's the effort? Like, I can just grab that. We want to keep it just enough and add the fun to it and a little bit of frustration, and then that drives the focus, and then we're getting our D1 receptors, and we're getting our serotonin releases, and we're getting our norepinephrine, and that's like the perfect chemical basis to activate these NMDA receptors, get the neuroplasticity firing, and also in the aspect that pushing is always good, growth is always good, and there's these terms of term potentiation, long-term depression within neuroplasticity, and we always tell patients to take breaks from care sometimes in efforts to trim back the excess that we don't need. Growth isn't always, growth is good, but we have to shift it and mold it into what it is for you. This trimming of unwanted connections allows for extra energy into other connections and more opportunity for growth. So this challenge needs phases of challenging and pushing and then cutting back and just living your life and not necessarily challenging it to the most, so that your brain and your nervous system can go through and be like, okay, that branch we can cut.
Or an integration process. You're integrating back into what your normal routine is and what we're pushing in the clinic every time you're in.
Exactly.
That's not part of your normal day-to-day.
Exactly. Like your normalcy isn't include seeing us all the time. Which is another point, right? We mentioned taking a pill earlier and like the ease of that, right? What's your time around that, right? If you're like, oh, I'm going to just be on statins the rest of my life, you're taking a statin every day for the next 20 years.
Going to see a doctor every however many months.
What kind of dedication is that compared to just seeing us a couple times a week for 10, 20 weeks?
Then integrating the stuff we teach as well. And you're at home, is it easier to just take that pill every day, or is it easier to do some eye movements every day, or take more breaks from work, or is it easier to make sure you're eating enough food and drinking enough water throughout your day?
Yeah.
It kind of depends on what you consider easy, honestly.
And I know you talk about this, facing something is harder. It feels harder in the short term, but in the long term, that is the best thing to do, because you're actually addressing instead of avoiding. And that's, I don't think that can be overstated, like how significant that is. Whether you're healing from a brain injury or dysautonomia or any kind of chronic health thing or not, just in life, avoiding versus saying, you know what, regulate, confront, deal with it.
That's a big aspect of just day-to-day anxiety. A lot of day-to-day anxiety.
It's kind of like pushing it
work,
away.
Stress, whatever. It's the procrastination of it. It's the procrastination of whatever it is that you know you should be doing. You just aren't going to do it yet, even though once you do it, it takes 5-10 minutes, and then you don't have to think about it again.
It's like a beach ball that you keep pushing under the surface of the water, and it's back again.
The anticipation is the worst part.
Break it into bites for yourself too. Task completion and achievement is gonna motivate you to do the next thing and make it a little more challenging, and the next thing a little more challenging. And then you can snowball these effects together. Yeah, the compound effect becomes easier. And it's challenging to start, and it's hard, and it's simple, right? It's not easy. We're not telling you it's easy, but it's a pretty simple solution, right? You gotta eat, you gotta drink water, you gotta socialize and have fun, you've gotta move, you gotta breathe, you gotta sleep. Like, these are some basics. And it's hard to set those as staples and pay attention to those things. The longer you do them, the easier they become, the more in the background. Back to brushing teeth, nobody thinks about that. You just do it. Your parents have harped on you so many times on actually doing it that it's now ingrained in you that you just do it. And everybody knows don't cross the road without looking both ways, but nobody seems to know that we need to be drinking an ounce of water per pound of body weight. Yeah. If we ingrain some of that stuff, it's hard at first, but it becomes easier. So,
even what you just described, y'all have this thing called the Axon Big Five, which is the starting point for most of your patients. And they are sleep, nutrition, breathwork, community, and movement. Each of those things that sound pretty, oh yeah, okay.
No shit.
Duh. And you mentioned drinking enough water. That's a big one. Maybe in each of those 5, I think it might be useful if you give a pretty overgeneralized thing that everyone could do. I know everybody's different, but for sleep, what's one thing that you say, if you want to improve your sleep, here's one thing you can do?
What would you say? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that one's a little bit more specific, but that one would be either sleeping with a window open or sleeping with a door open, so you're getting enough oxygen flow in the room.
Easy.
Okay,
And
so have some fresh air coming in.
Yeah, they've seen if it's you, your partner, and at least one animal in the
circulating.
same room, just recirculating
Yeah.
the air. Like at a certain point, after a certain number of hours, you're going to be breathing the same air.
It's a mild carbon monoxide poisoning, and that will decrease quality of sleep. Aside any of the blue blockers or
I would say bigger
cutting
than
light.
that, though. I would say phone usage before bed is a bigger.
than oxygen.
That one's one that more people are doing. I would say a lot of people sleep with their window open.
Some
I
people
feel
might
like.
have a big room or
Or
whatever.
a fan going, a
Yeah.
window open, something like that. But a lot of people are on their phones until they go to bed, or that's their wind down routine before they go to bed.
And is
They're
it, what
on-
would you recommend? Is it 60 minutes before bed, 2 hours before bed, 30 minutes before bed? Okay.
I would
Okay.
say the
If you can
longer
do
the
2
better.
hours?
The longer the better, but start with the easy. 30 minutes before bed to start, and then work
Yeah.
your way up.
Yeah.
If you can get to the point where by the time you get home, you decompress from work, you're off the phone completely until you go to bed, that's the ideal state.
And the reasoning for that, and there's a decent amount of information on the internet, but it's the high frequency blue light waves. They're more excitatory to the brain as far as I understand.
It's that, it's also whatever quality of stuff you're consuming.
If you're on these quick,
And the light as a whole.
fast-paced
Yeah.
Instagram
If
or
you're,
TikToks.
yeah, you're scrolling on something back to back, like that's going to keep you stimulated
Got it.
in that state of wanting more, to the point where you're not being present, you're not regulating your breathing, you're not actually winding down for sleep, you're stimulated
Yep.
in that regard.
And I mean, Andrew Huberman talks on this.
Matthew
Just-
Walker, there's some really good
Yeah,
doctors
yeah.
out there talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
sleep and all this.
Yeah.
And the blue light's more important once the sun goes down. But even viewing the specific blue light frequencies at sunset help you delay the negative impacts of light exposure on your melatonin blunting. So having that aspect, even just being outside and doing your
So basically,
things.
like observing the sun going down, feeling the house get slightly darker. It can
Yeah.
even be as simple as that.
And firelight is not disruptive. Fire flickers at 9 to 11 hertz,
Which is alpha.
which is calming and focusing, which
That's
is
really fascinating.
winding down. You can get night lights that flicker, like firelight, or the little fake candles. Light phone consumption of data and information. Yeah.
That's a good one. I
Yeah.
like.
And 30 minutes is, I think, at the very basic.
That's at the
Don't
very
do it
start.
while laying in bed. Period.
Yeah.
Get out of bed or before you get to bed. The bedroom is a sacred zone that should only be used for sleeping and love. If you're working in your bedroom, you better move that desk. That's going to disrupt.
So when I'm helping people maybe begin their meditation practice, I say it's really nice to pick a spot in your house where you can make it feel, you can consecrate it, which means make it sacred. Put a couple photos of loved ones or a teacher that you love or just maybe a rock that you found on a vacation with your boyfriend or girlfriend. There's things that you can add to this space and meditate there every day. Have that be your special space.
An environment plays a big way. If it's hard for you to switch mindsets, there's stress, and then
Yeah.
that stress is associated. And
With that
even
room,
then, change your environment, and you can change that mindset. If you can't meditate or drop into that meditation at home because the dog's barking or you got things that you need to do, find a space that you can go and do that meditation. If I can't motivate myself to go work out in our garage gym, I can drive myself to the gym and focus on working out there. That's a change of scenery, that's a change of placement, and thus mindset. Use that to help trigger that change if you're struggling with that right now.
One of the most successful at-home patients that I remember working with at that clinic years ago, when she got home, she set up for her at-home eye exercises for her concussion symptoms. She had a specific corner of a room she had the Brock beads and she had the things she needed in this corner. And she went every day when it was time, like twice a day, to do her exercises. Her brain was just ready to do it because she had entered that space. And the momentum, she actually did her at-home exercises and thrived. And we had to keep trying to throw harder things at her. And that was memorable to me because you took the time, create this space dedicated to this thing.
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, sleep, that sounds great. Try not to do work and high stress activities in your place of sleep. Be off your phone before you get ready for bed.
Yep.
And potentially open a window or have some airflow.
Yeah.
That seems really good. Nutrition. What's one thing that you could recommend? Hey, is it the water piece? Drink enough good quality water.
That would be part of the hydration.
Just to be universal. Everybody's different.
The 80-20 principle, I would say, would be the most basic. 80% of the time, you're very conscious of what you're eating, very good about taking in food as nutrition, as fuel. And then 20% of the time, do whatever you want.
Release your...
You still got to live. Just don't feel guilty about it. That 20% of the time, enjoy whatever it is. You're going out to eat, enjoy what you're eating.
80% of the time, try to lock it down for the fueling of your system.
And that can be different based on what people have going on in their systems.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But 80-20 is pretty non-restrictive. It definitely promotes way better health and sustainability. It's not some fad thing. It's not like some high restrictive thing that's going to burn out. This is sustainable for life.
I don't think the ascetic approach to food is the best way forward, to say, I am so strict with what I'm eating. Some people may be that way because it's their choice and they enjoy it. They don't like any sugar or anything like that. But once in a while, people like pizza.
Exactly.
And to judge yourself and make it worse, that's not in your best interest. Or even though it may feel like, it's a whole thing.
Or to eat fake pizza every day of the week. Or fake ice cream. Just eat the real thing 20% of the time. That's it. That just don't. Yeah.
I feel like that's, again, very doable and accessible for most people. And that's, I think, the big thing. The best thing is what you'll do. Or however you exercise, the thing you'll actually do.
And I guess that moves into movement.
Movement. Obviously, different people are listening. Some may be wheelchair bound. So maybe upper body is what they got going on. Some people might be ambulatory.
Try to find probably 2 or 3 different forms of activity and exercise that you like in a week and do those things. Try to switch it around.
Keep it fresh.
Do something more than what your baseline activity is.
If you only walk every single day of the week, throw in something that's a little bit more fun for you or a little bit more stimulating. Pickleball. You can go do a workout and start doing Pilates. You can rollerblade. You can add so many variabilities on
make it fun.
What your regular exercises are rather than it just feeling like you're exercising.
And the novelty, I think, is a big part of that aspect to keep you going too.
If you're excited about doing it, you're going to do it more.
And do it to your capacity for that day. So we go to the gym before we go to the clinic in the mornings, and some days we really like that snooze button. And that's okay. We didn't get our hour in the gym, but that doesn't stop us from doing 5 minutes of push-ups, sit-ups, and air squats over here in the living room.
Yeah, we're doing some yoga that evening instead.
Right? A little more than your baseline. And our baseline is a lot, maybe to some people that might work a sedentary job. We're running around the clinic a lot. There's days that we take over 10,000 steps just within our clinic space. There's also people that, like construction workers, that you are physically working all day long, but that doesn't count for physical activity. It's not above your baseline. That's your normal.
That's their normal.
You have to do more than that on a daily basis. And even as small as just a 1% in excess of your daily movement is what we're asking for.
I would imagine most personal trainers and people in the movement space would agree that, again, to harp on the same thing, make it fun for yourself. Don't make it feel like an obligation. Pick the thing that you get some enjoyment out of doing. And some people may say, I haven't found that thing yet. I don't like to play sports. I don't like to run.
There's something.
There's got to be something.
It could be being silly and playing with your dog and chasing your dog around the house.
Yes.
Pretty good.
Still movement.
There's almost this like weight loss component to it, where it's I have to do it to lose weight. That's why I should be moving. Because we have a large number of obese people and overweight people in our country. That's another conversation. The simple fact is movement is for a lot more than that. The brain needs movement. Movement is super good for the brain. And just goes beyond the weight loss and fat loss thing.
And for aging, too. That's such a big component with aging, too. We were talking about that earlier.
Telomeres and all that.
The more you move, the longer you can move. If you are sedentary your entire life and then at 70 you decide you want to start lifting weights to fend off osteoporosis, it's too late. You're probably already in the early stages because you hadn't done that your entire life.
Yeah.
Your body had adapted to not needing to lift weights. That wasn't part of your daily routine.
Use it or lose it. And even now we're seeing muscle density as a way better predictor of longevity than even telomere length. And how dense your quadricep muscles are specifically can predict your likelihood of quality of life throughout your ages.
I've heard this before. It's actually lifting heavy things like strength training is what is the best.
Resistance training, particularly spinal loaded weight training against gravity, is where we see a lot of...
picture squatting.
Spinal load, back squats.
Front squats, whatever.
Yep. And again, if that's not your mode, find something else. But there is not a single population of people that should not be doing squats. I don't care if you've had disc bulges, herniated discs, back surgery. I don't care if you're 98 years old and you have frail bones. Squats are for everybody. It's such a primal movement of us as humans. Obviously modified to that person. But yeah, bone remodeling based on stressors placed upon it. So the more stress you can put on a bone, the stronger that bone's going to be. And resistance training seems to be that ticket item, even just respiratory.
And also, like, you're moving your muscles, too. So that's more than just if you're running. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Aerobic training versus anaerobics or whatnot.
So movement, every week do 2 to 3 things that are different than your normal baseline, that ideally are enjoyable, fun, and challenging a little bit.
Definitely, and frustrates you, but
cool.
So we got sleep, we got movement, nutrition,
community.
Talk about that.
I feel like we touched on that a little bit with the meals earlier, but...
Same thing.
What if somebody lives alone and they eat alone? For that person, maybe, what would you say?
Interesting.
I would say branching out in general doesn't have to just be around meals. Just branching out and having a community to some degree.
Acting with other people.
Exactly. Yep. Could be...
in person, hopefully.
In
but
person,
also,
ideally.
Phone calls are great for when you can't do that.
Exactly.
Connecting, I think, is really the ultimate thing.
Right? Yeah. And to be clear, we are more connected than we ever have been through social media. But we're also not really connecting with people. It's worth mentioning to have a legitimate phone call with somebody. Or like a FaceTime, that's great. Because you're in real time interacting with this person if they're remote. Because a lot of us have families far away. But finding somewhere in a local community spot in your city, in your town, that has a gathering of like-minded, maybe not even necessarily, but just people that you can have this sense of togetherness with, that has major implications for health.
Yep.
I imagine that's why you guys focus on it so much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So Harvard released a study, and we can show that probably somewhere here on the podcast, but if you were over the age of 65 and you had 5 good friends, and they had these 2 criteria for these friends. It's somebody you could call upon past midnight to come pick you up and save you from a situation, or lend you $5,000. I guess they put a time and a monetary aspect to this friendship side of things, but this was their criteria. And if you were 65 and you had over 5 friends, I think it was something wildly drastic, like a 60 or 80% less likelihood of developing neurodegeneration diseases.
Wow.
Yeah. 5 friends, dude. That's all it takes. And again, I think they postulate and they go into the depths of you're socially connected to these people and you have memory and thoughts on their lives.
Yeah.
I know what you're doing. I know your ambitions. I know your partner's ambitions. I know maybe some of your struggles. I know maybe some of the struggles of your family. So there's this level of data that your brain then has to store, and then it gets used to storing mass amounts of information. And just knowing 5 of these good friends is really more like hundreds of people that you're keeping up with their lives. That aspect of consistent connection drives the ability to feel cognitively young.
Just in a capacity-wise is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I also, what I think of is, I picture the sad reality of a lot of nursing homes in our country. And I'd imagine around the world, too. Isolation is a major theme. These people are, it sounds harsh, but they're discarded by their families because they're a burden. It's heartbreaking, though, because they're isolated and sometimes they'll just sit in silence all day.
Yeah.
What would that do to the brain that's already trending toward that neurodegeneration? It's going to accelerate that because it's just circling in on itself and has...
There's no novelty.
Well, I would assume, too, I haven't seen any data on this, but you can just think on a day where you're completely solo the entire day, it's just you, what are your brain waves like, and what is just like your processing capacity in general as compared to if you're doing something social? You're sitting at home, you're listening to music, you're listening to an audiobook. What brain state are you in general as compared to if you're like, okay, I'm about to go and interact with these people, I have to be ready, I have to be engaged, all of that.
That would be
but I would
interesting
assume there is some substantial difference in the brain waves, the states, all of that in general.
There's focus. They have fun with friends. And you might get frustrated with some friends.
And even just the very real energy exchange that happens with other people. But if you're alone, it's like you're closed off in your egg. Yeah.
Yep.
That's the community piece is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
It's so big.
And I don't know many medical providers who are talking about, some people will, of course, like, hey, when was the last time you went out and did something?
Yep.
But it's part of your Axon Big Five.
Yeah.
It's not just something you casually mention, it seems like.
No, and it's something even that we see in a majority of our dementia patients, regardless of the pathophysiology of that dementia, frontotemporal, Alzheimer's disease, this aspect of, I worked a highly social job, and then I went into retirement, and I've done nothing for the past 5-10 years. And it's like, well, dude, you just stopped.
You came to a screeching halt.
You went from being a teacher, seeing a class of 20 kids, 40 parents, and 100 other teachers, to now just you. And you didn't socially keep up with any of them. And it's sad, right? Because then we ask these patients, I'm like, okay, how many friends could you call upon right now? They're like, honestly, more often than not, none. None. Okay, your homework is to go meet one new friend. Go to bingo. Go knit. I say that for the one particular patient. She hits her bingo and mahjong 4 times a week. She will live to be 100. And she doesn't live the healthiest lifestyle. She's super stressed.
But she has the beauty aspect down.
Right now.
They're involved. They're valued and involved and included. I think that's a big piece of this. Because just thinking about a tribe, once somebody has reached the point where they're not contributing or they're not included, the only choice is to deteriorate and give your meat suit back to the earth to regenerate, because there's an intelligence to all of this. And that's an appropriate response if you look at it that way. I'm not needed anymore, so I can dissolve into nothingness. I really love the idea of having this cultural inclusion, because if you look at some other, think about European or even some Asian cultures, the elderly are very much integrated into the stereotype of 4 generations in one house. There's a vertical integration there between children, parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents often. We don't necessarily have that much here in our very new country.
And that's a magnitude of knowledge that we don't get.
We're not seeking the elderly wisdom so much.
We always
Because youth is desirable, and it's almost like aging is a disease rather than a stage of life that should be honored and revered.
And celebrated.
Thanks for sharing all that about the community aspect of it.
And I'm blanking on the 5th one. Which one haven't we covered?
Sleep.
Yep.
Movement.
Yep.
Nutrition. Community. Breathwork or mindset. Breathwork.
Breathwork.
Yeah, and it's just oxygenation, right?
Yeah, we breathe every day. So that seems important.
And the fact that you don't think about it sometimes is concerning.
That was something that I experienced quite a bit at the clinic that you and I met at, the brain injury clinic. I would say, you've been breathing your whole life. Have you ever thought about how to breathe?
Yeah.
No, not really. And then what goes along with that? Have you ever thought about thinking and what thinking is? You're like, no, not really. Okay, let's start there though. These processes, breathing is a really interesting one, right? Because it is something that we can deliberately choose to do, but also it's automatic. It's like in the autonomic side of things. It's a weird kind of overlap of the two.
Yep.
But that's also an opportunity. The fact that you can add volition to it. Because I can't necessarily will my GI system to do different things. Some people might be able to. I can't. The smooth muscles do what they want.
Or it's like, I'm going to dump some bile in there.
And thank goodness we don't have to
think about that.
Control our internal factory of chemicals. I wouldn't have lasted a minute.
No, none of us.
But with breath work, let's get into what does that mean in the Axon lens.
And I guess you touched on that one critical factor of it is really the only thing that happens both subconsciously and consciously to the same degree. There's a lot of things that happen subconsciously, right? Like your heartbeat. But you can't necessarily consciously pause those and or accelerate those. Breath is the only thing that you can do both with completely.
And what are the benefits of being able to consciously affect your breathing?
Oxygenation will start there. CO2 balance, and then even going down the line into how that affects pH balance and acidosis and alkalosis. If you're too alkaline or too acidic in the blood, that's going to have detrimental effects downstream into
tiny bits of severe illness.
You're not going to maintain a mental stressor, and you're going to be in an acidotic state, and you're not going to be able to absorb or deliver nutrients to these tissues. It's the basis of life.
Even on a bigger picture, if you're ever in fight or flight or you're stressed, you're automatically going to be breathing faster and shallower. So you're trying to get those quick breaths in.
As they say.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you consciously make an effort of slowing down your breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, actually slowing it down, that's going to slow down your system in general. Because at the end of the day, if you're sitting there chest breathing while you're stressed out typing emails or holding your breath while you're doing stuff, that's just going to increase heart rate. That's just going to increase your stress overall.
And your oxygen CO2 balance will be off.
Yeah.
Because you're likely, in that situation, correct me if I'm wrong, you're taking in quite a bit of oxygen, but you're not really getting all the CO2 out.
Exactly,
Because it is very much a balance.
Yep, exactly.
And even when you hold your breath, that initial urge to gasp and get out and be like, oh my gosh, I need to breathe, isn't a cry or a need for oxygen as much as it's a need for exhaling and expelling CO2.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We need to be able to expel this stuff as well and be able to tolerate and modulate that physiological stress, which is why I guess Wim Hof is so popular now too, is because it really has an effect in CO2 tolerance and that physiological stress having a conversion into mental stress and being able to adapt to that, which I guess touches into challenging yourself and being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and hunting and seeking out this discomfort allows you to better handle the discomfort when it's not your choice. So I think breathwork on so many levels, physiologically, brain, body, and mind, physiological, mentally, and neurologically have such large implications, the vast effects. Oxygen's the basis for our human life.
Yeah.
And we can survive without food for, what, 3 days?
I think it depends on the person.
3 or 4
I think
days.
it could be weeks for some people.
I was gonna say, without food, I think it's longer. I think it's without water, it's shorter.
2 or 3 days or something, but even, you can't live 5 minutes without oxygen.
Yeah.
You go and knock, so you can have brain injuries at 15 minutes. So that's something that's crucial to make everything run better. And try to not compare ourselves to vehicles because we're not machines. We're self-healing machines, which is something way next level. But if you starved a motor of oxygen and just put fuel into it, it's not burning that either. You need that proper ratio of fuel and oxygen consumption. And if we're missing that, then the motor's not firing well, and the brain's not firing well, and it's not signaling to the kidneys or the liver or the GI system or whatever it is. Breathwork is probably what ties it all together.
And the word pranayama, prana is life force in India. So the breath and the life force are the same word. It's the same thing. The thing that animates the human body, their spirit, electricity, all of it, it's the same as the breath. That vital energy, that prana. I always thought that was profound, that they chose the same word for those things.
Yeah.
So it sounds, Hannah, you mentioned diaphragmatic breathing. A lot of people, I imagine, benefit from that because, especially I think about desk jobs, people who are sedentary, they're breathing in their upper third of their full capacity.
Yep.
So would you say that's a starting point for people? Just teach them how to breathe.
Yep.
Because it's not something that we're necessarily taught as kids. Little babies, belly breathing, it's a thing. But then our posture changes as we get closed off and we breathe here.
Yep.
So how would you teach somebody how to breathe properly?
Typically, I'll start with the diaphragmatic breathing.
And what does that mean exactly? But maybe somebody's listening who's never actually heard that before.
Yeah, so basically, instead of just breathing up here, most people, if you tell them, take a deep breath, you'll watch them, chest rises, belly sucks in. And so with that, they're doing essentially the inverse of what you're wanting to do with belly breathing. You're wanting to, instead of expand the chest, you're wanting to expand here. So that way you're expanding into the larger part of the cavity, which is all the way down through here instead of just up here. And so with that, we'll teach them, typically it's laying down is the way I like to do it. They're laying on their back.
Great.
So whenever they expand, they're not only expanding belly up, they're also expanding back towards the floor.
They have that contact for kind of feedback a little
bit.
Right? 360
Yep,
degrees.
so they can expand this direction rather than just pushing the belly out, because a lot of people just try to arch the back and essentially cheat it. So helping them to expand both directions, that way they're getting that full deep inhale, and then having them practice that at home. And so that does tend to be the basics, and then working into actual breath work stuff, where they're doing the specifics with Wim Hof technique or the physiological side, that kind of stuff. But from the basics, making sure people can do that diaphragmatic breathing, that has such implications not only on nervous system regulation, all of these things, but it also has such an impact on core strength and low back pain and pelvic floor issues and all these other things that kind of are secondary and not really talked about of how it can be prevented other than just working out.
If you only use your spinal stabilizers when you squat, it's probably a bad thing.
They're not going to have a good time.
You could use those spinal stabilizers every time you take a breath. I think also like physics goes into it too. I think everybody likes to think that we're either breathing in or breathing out, and you're sucking air or you're pushing air. And it's not the case. When we move that diaphragm down, you create a negative pressure system, and it automatically pulls the air. It's going to flood in like a bucket you're pushing under the water. It's just going to start dumping in. Yeah. And then the same thing, right? You open your mouth and your diaphragm comes up, and it's creating a positive pressure, and then it pushes the air, and you don't need to like throat through it. But yeah, I guess go through like a physiological sigh and something that's like immediately achievable in a split second when somebody's stressed or standing in line, or maybe not, and just wanting to...
in general, this one helps like reduce heart rate pretty rapidly. And so you're basically just taking 3 inhales as compared to 1 exhale. So that way you're completely filling your lungs to what it feels like capacity, and then going a little bit further, and then exhaling all of it forcefully. Yeah.
Even faster.
And so if you think about it, whenever like kids are like distressed or crying or anything like that, you'll notice like if they're like really crying really hard, in order to catch their breath, they don't just do a deep inhale, they go and then they breathe it out. Same exact concept, you're just hijacking the system now consciously. And so same concept, that's how you bring everything back down.
And how does that work? What is the mechanism of that? Are you aware of like why that works?
You're overloading that oxygen and then expelling forcefully as
like
much CO2 as possible. It also is helping to regulate the heart rate. Do you remember that one?
It's the same positive, negative pressure. So we have what's called sinus arrhythmias, which are totally normal. Yep, exactly. And then it slows down as you exhale. But that big, long, drastic, dramatic exhale tanks that heart rate.
And then it has like a new baseline after that.
And then it levels back out again. I think the sudden rush of air against that soft palate is cooling down the blood that's sitting there and thus getting delivered to the brain. I think that there's a level of vagus nerve stimulation that's going on with that as well.
I also think just the mindfulness aspect as well. Yeah. You're breathing intentionally, which is something you're not doing throughout your day anyways, so you have that few moments of actually consciously focusing on it.
Added on top of the actual physiological benefit, yeah.
It's probably a way more complex reason as to why this is working, but...
I don't think that's important. I think just basics are great for people to understand.
Yeah, if you want more, we'll put links in the caption kind of deal.
And there are many different types of breathwork techniques and practices for different outcomes. There are techniques like Wim Hof and like Kapalabhati, which is like breath of fire, which is hyper oxygenating, and it has its purpose. It might not be for everybody. In fact, it's not for everybody. But I would say universally across the board, people can breathe deeper into their diaphragm, lower into their kind of full balloon apparatus that we have. Most people can benefit from just focusing on that piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fundamentals, foundations of breathing.
Yeah, that's the big 5.
That's great.
Take homes for sure. Practice out these things and see how they affect your life and your lifestyle, and any positive notes, any negative notes, try to write them down and process through that. But yeah, if you have any other topics you want us to cover or go through, or anything you want us to touch on maybe a little more in depth,
send us a raven.
Yeah, but yeah, so you good over there, Lucy? Yeah, thanks for joining us today and listening. And thank you, Ronnie, for being here and coming down.
Thank you for having me. It's fun.
Looking forward to more episodes.
Definitely.
And any last remarks, Hannah?
Nope.
It's okay to be frustrated.
It's okay.
Especially when you're having fun. That's a dichotomy that does actually work. It's
I like that.
Most of the time I ski, but it's so damn fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, give yourself some grace. Enjoy life. Slow down a little bit and do what brings you joy and what motivates you. It might not be the same as what motivates your best friend next to you. So listen to yourself and listen to your own body giving you these signals back.
Yeah, look under the hood a little bit.
Yeah, challenge yourself a little bit. It's good. It's good to feel uncomfortable. Put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and hunt that stuff out in your life and do more of it. Practice the big 5. Yeah.
Vitality. That's what we want, right?
Yeah, longevity is nothing without vitality.
Yeah.
So I don't care how long we live if it's not living fun. So yeah, join us next episode on Brain, Body, Mind. And yeah, I think that's it. We don't have any sponsors yet, so we can't really throw that stuff out there or anything. Yeah, I think that's about it. Cool. Thanks for coming, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Go forth. What's your email signature? Your Ram Dass.
We are all walking each other home.
Oh,
yep.
I love that quote.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enjoy. Go forth.